Hello, class. So today I will be talking about norovirus, or NOV for short. So the infectious agent for norovirus is going to be norovirus, or NOV. It's an unenveloped single-strand RNA positive virus from the Calciviridae family, if I read that right. There are five genera of this family, including vesivirus, sapovirus, loggovirus, and nebovirus. And there are six known genogroups. There might be a seventh one. Only three of them infect human beings, so the other ones infect mice, I believe cattle, and maybe another animal I'm forgetting. But G1, G2, and G4 genogroups infect humans, and there are also genotypes for every genogroup, so you might have multiple genotypes for a genogroup. This causative agent causes gastroenteritis, which is defined as inflammation of the stomach and the intestines. And this is what causes the diarrhea and the vomiting that you see from norovirus. There are three common names that I want to go over. The first is cruciate and people call this not because these diseases exclusively occur on cruise ships. Only 1% of norovirus outbreaks occur on cruise ships, so it's not very common on cruise ships. But when you have diarrheal diseases on cruise ships, over 90% of them are linked to norovirus. And this occurs because you are in close proximity to other people. So you're going to dine in about the same place. You're living very close to other people. It also spreads on surfaces. So this is very important. It's very resistant to disinfectants, so it's very easy to spread on surfaces, whether it and the source can come from outside the ship, so people bringing in contaminated food and water, people who already have the illness, people on the ship might have the illness, or it might just be in the environment. So its survivability on surfaces is definitely something that makes it contagious. Another name for it is the norovirus viruses, and this virus was discovered through electron microscopy in 1972 based off a 1968 outbreak, which occurred in Norwalk, Ohio, at a school. So that's why it's called Norwalk-like virus, as it refers to the city where it originated, or where it's first discovered, I should say. Stomach flu is another. Stomach flu or stomach bugs are another common name for norovirus. So these norovirus isn't linked to influenza. So if you are still wondering whether norovirus was actually an influenza, it isn't. Another thing that we're going to go over is symptoms. So it's important to first go over the incubation period and how long you have the symptoms. So you're going to have an incubation period of half a day to 2 days, and you're going to be sick for 1 to looks like about 3 days. So just a few days of being sick. The symptoms of this would include vomiting many times a day, diarrhea many times today. The features of the diarrhea are going to be watery and non-bloody, so you're not going to have bloody diarrhea. The other symptoms are abdominal cramping. You're going to have malaise, which is defined as a general feeling of discomfort, myalgia, which is muscle pains. You're going to have headaches, and also very uncommon. Well, I won't say very uncommon because it happens half the time, but low-grade fevers. The complications that could come of this is dehydration, and this happens usually in immunocompromised or people that are adversely affected, or people in poor countries that can't afford access to clean water. As we'll talk about later, this virus can be spread asymptomatically, which is very scary. 30% of these infections are asymptomatic, so 30% of people who have this virus can still shed particles of norovirus, but do not know they have it. So it puts other people at risk of getting the disease. Long-term sequelae of this includes irritable bowel syndrome. So definitely something to watch out for. So the transmission from this virus usually happens through the fecal oral route, kind of like polio that we talked about before, in droplets of vomit and feces. If that gets through your oral mucosa, you're going to get the disease. Uh, we people who have norovirus shed billions of particles, but it only takes around 18 or more to get infected by it. So that's not very many particles that are required to infect you for a virus that sheds billions. That's pretty crazy. Human reservoir. So as we talked about before, there are three genogroups that affect humans. So if we're talking about human noroviruses, which are in the genogroups 1, 2, and 4, that's going to have only a human reservoir. So the virus, as we said before, spreads through food. So we've already talked about botulism as a foodborne illness. This also spreads through food, mostly from poop or feces, vomit, particles that are on it, and this could happen from the conditions that it was produced or grown in. So, as we see from fruits, if norovirus infect contaminated water gets on it, it can cause norovirus if you eat it. And oysters is apparently very special uh, that you cook them and steam them. It also spreads through water. So, we've already discussed waterborne illnesses in this class in terms of cholera. Norovirus can also spread through water, mostly untreated water. So, if you think about it, if it spreads through the fecal oral route, this happens if you ingest water that's contaminated with feces or vomit. So, it also spreads through surfaces. As we said before, it's very resistant to disinfectants, so it's very hard to kill. So, uh, it's very important that you disinfect surfaces. It can spread through surfaces from food. It can spread through surfaces through diarrhea or vomit itself. So it can spread through multiple ways onto surfaces. So, where do outbreaks occur? They usually occur in places where there's a lot of people close together, so confined spaces. We already talked about the cruise ship. There's other places that have a lot of people that could foster an outbreak of norovirus. And the last thing is the institutional settings. So that can include schools, daycares. I believe hospitals are very at risk. So it's very important for good hygiene around these places so that you can prevent the spread of the disease. So if we look at the effect of norovirus on the world, it actually causes 1 in 5 gastroenteritis cases, which is pretty crazy because there's a lot of diarrheal diseases out there. So that's a large number. 685 million get norovirus or gastroenteritis. Uh, that's about a third of those are children, and 50,000 of those children will die from the complications. So this is mostly caused because of lack of access to clean water. So you see a lot of countries that have problems. You see them not having a lot of water sources that are sanitary, and this is known as a winter disease. I think it's mostly prevalent in January, February, so it's centered around the winter time. So prevention, the biggest thing is to wash your hands. So just in case you don't know, washing your hands includes warm soapy water for 20 seconds. A good way to make sure that you're washing your hands for the full 20 seconds is singing the chorus of Toto Africa while you wash your hands. It's about 20, 21 seconds. So it's a perfect time for you to wash your hands. As I said before, disinfecting, cleaning surfaces, using disinfectants. You want to make sure that whenever somebody has vomited or had diarrhea, that you clean surfaces, and especially things that they might have touched, since we've already said that it can spread through food and water, through things that people touch, the surfaces. Steaming oysters. We already talked about how you should how it spreads through food through oysters, and it can do through fruits and vegetables. So you always want to make sure to wash fruits and vegetables. You always may want to make sure to steam oysters. The thing about this, though, is that there's no vaccine. They're probably research. I think they're researching it right now, but it's very hard to develop a vaccine since the capsid evolves over time. Makes it very hard to design a vaccine for that. The treatment for this disease is going to be pretty much IV fluids. That's mostly going to happen if you're going to have complications. So um, That's for severe cases. Usually, you just need to drink plenty of fluids and replenish your fluids through that way. And the last thing I put is just washing hands again. I know it's technically not a treatment, but you're preventing the spread of the disease by washing your hands, because it can go through surface, it can transmit through surfaces. So you want to make sure to wash your hands. And the big thing about this, though, is you're always supposed to wash your hands. That's a given. We already talked about how 30% of infections are asymptomatic. So you could have norovirus and you don't even know. So that's why it's very important always to wash your hands and develop good hygiene habits. And the last thing I'm going to go over is diagnostic testing, the RT-PCR test, real-time PCR, RT-PCR, not real-time PCR, detects nucleic acids. So in this case, we'll detect the norovirus and give you those results. So these are my works cited. Thank you for paying attention to this presentation. And I look forward to answering your questions on Monday.